On July 25, 2008, a group of firefighters were working on the Iron Fire complex in California. They were falling trees. While one tree was falling, it hit by accident another tree, and one huge heavy branch collapsed and hit young Andy Palmer, who was on his very first fire assignment that day. The branch broke his leg in several places and severed his femoral artery. One of his crewmates picked up the radio and called the dispatch for help. In telegraphic manner, he said, men down, medical emergency, we need help, dozer pad, broken leg, bleeding, we need help, call 911, dozer line, drop point 72 and dozer line, call 911, we need help. The dispatch office picked up the telephone to call the paramedics, and they said, sounds like a broken leg. It took a while for the paramedics to reach Andy Palmer because of his location up in the mountains. And when they got there, they realized they had brought with them only splint to help with a fracture, but not equipment to help with severe bleeding. Because it took too long for Andy Palmer to get to a hospital, he lost too much blood and perished that day. The wildland firefighting community didn't want that tragic accident to go unlearned from. So they revised and introduced new procedures, new protocols for reporting of medical emergency up in the mountains, for requesting medical evacuation. And those pages are now Andy Palmer's pages. They're known as Andy Palmer's pages in the incident response pocket guide that every firefighter trains with. Moving on to another high-risk industry, to the medical field. This year, in July, the Journal of Patient Safety utilized 3 years' worth of data from the Veteran Health Administration, zooming in on the types of communication errors with clinical outcomes that reached the patients. They found 9 types of communication errors. The top 3: 1, people not following standard operating procedures; 2, unclear documentation and written documentation; and 3, absence of communication. I am mentioning these stories from 2 high-risk industries, wildland firefighting and medicine, to tell you 2 things. 1, we're all fallible. We're not perfect communicators. And 2, our words are really, really powerful, and they can really make a difference in the life and death of patients or workers in the workplace. In fact, British psychologist James Reason, who wrote about organizational accidents, and he studied cognitive lapses and errors, one day he was trying to make tea and feed his cat, and being distracted, he put the tea bag in the cat bowl and cat food in the teapot. And he asked his wife, how often do I do this? And his wife said, oh, honey, you have no idea. So he proceeded to systematically study cognitive lapses. And his book mentions that indeed, nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. But what mindful organizations and highly reliable organizations have, they have systems in place with protective layers, such as training and supervision and safety layers to catch the inevitable human failure and human mistakes. So in grad school, I got passionate about high reliability organizing. I took a few super courses at Purdue in the graduate program in organizational communication. And then a few years later, I was part of a grant with wildland firefighters. But you know, I started my job at Bradley University, and I knew I wanted my research to inform my teaching, but we don't get many wildland fires in Illinois. On the fire map, Illinois looks bright green. Our humidity levels are very high. So it couldn't be a course just about wildland firefighting. I expanded the course to several high-risk industries: aviation, medicine, wildland fire, and the energy industry. The theoretical framework, well, the accidents that we cover in our class make up for a very somber, very sad course. We discuss tragedies in each of these 4 industries. In aviation, we talk about the Tenerife accident of 1977, the deadliest accident that led to over 500 people losing their life when 2 787s collided on the runway, on a foggy runway on the island of Tenerife. That accident changed forever how air traffic controllers talk to the pilots, how they give clearances for takeoff. We discussed the communication constraints of Captain Sullenberg, also known as Captain Sully, and in his successful Hudson landing that we all remember in 2009. We discussed the drift in the culture of safety that happened recently at Boeing when 2 of their aircraft crashed because they ignored their culture of safety. In Wildland Fire, we talk about incidents that changed the industry and how firefighters train. We discuss Men Gulch Fire, we discuss Kramer, Yarnell Fire, and of course, Andy Palmer's fatality with the Dutch Creek incident. In medicine, we talk about the Royal Bristol Infirmary, a special case in Britain where, unfortunately, at Royal Bristol Infirmary, they normalized the high fatality rate of young children that had undergone heart surgeries. In the energy industry, we discussed the devastating effects of Chernobyl and Fukushima and the Deepwater Horizon. So we cover a lot of accidents. And my goal as a teacher, my mission is truly to encourage my students to become mindful communicators in organizations. Because again, my course is open to all majors, engineers, nurses, physical therapists, and I want them to enter their high-risk organizations with that mindset of safety. The theoretical framework for my course comes from, it's not new, it's been around since the 90s. It comes from Carl Weick and Kathleen Sutcliffe, who themselves consulted with aviation, with the military, with hospitals. And it's a well-known framework. And they propose that all of these mindful organizations that manage to stay safe when successful, they share these 5 principles of high reliability. They are obsessed with how they could fail. They look for and imagine how they could fail, and they prepare and simulate and train in anticipation of those failures. They're also, they seek complexity rather than avoiding complexity and avoid, they avoid simplifying interpretations or running off with assumptions. They peel away at the complexity of what they face. And they pay close attention to operations and how people interact with equipment and machinery and how long tasks take and how well they can see a label. So operations are important. And they pay close attention to the experience and frustrations of people at the bedside or on the front line. Finally, they're committed to resilience. They plan, they have crisis management plans in place in case they fail to recover and ensure resilience. Another very important theoretical concept we talk about is the balance between production and safety. Most high reliable organizations have to balance both. You're in a for-profit business, you need to produce, so most organizations invest in production because you have to start with production to have money to invest in safety. But if you ignore safety too much, sooner or later you're going to have an accident. So mindful organizations balance that tension well and invest in both, especially because this tension is tricky. Production is easily noticeable and observable and celebrated, right? You can see the output. But safety is actually marked, the success of safety is marked by the absence of accidents. And I want to bring to your memory the Chilean mine collapse of 2010. Do you all remember that? When 33 miners in Chile at the Santiago mine, a gold and copper mine, were trapped inside after the collapse of a mine wall. They spent 69 days rationing food very carefully. And we all know the heroic international effort of creating this capsule that brought them out one by one after 69 days. But a less told story is this one. The very first thing the miners did when they realized they were trapped, they looked for the emergency evacuation ladder that the mine had promised, had put in place, metal steps implanted in the rock wall of the mine. It was supposed to be their escape route. Well, they got there and started climbing, and they realized that the ladder ended a third of the way. It is my purpose as a teacher to make sure that my students don't graduate to become a manager who signs off on building just a third of an escape route. As we see, this tension between production and safety really reveals the basic assumptions about the value of a human life that an organization holds. So it's got strong ethical undertones. So in 2021, when Ken Bain's book came out about supercourses, and he celebrated courses that ask big, fascinating questions that society needs help with, courses that engage students in active learning and group work, and challenge students' existing mental models, and teach for mindsets, not for memorization, and integrate real-world application, I thought, well, this course that I'm bringing to undergraduates at Bradley University perhaps meets that definition of a supercourse. But it's really not me that accomplishes that alone. Here I have pictures of my journey here. Again, I started with courses at Purdue, then a federal grant in firefighting in 2014 and 2016. And I had the privilege and opportunity to encounter one of the most mindful, high-risk industries and a mindful group of people, wildland firefighters. So I knew I was interested in that and researching radio communication practices in that field. But again, we don't have wildfires in Illinois, so it had to be expanded to other industries. I do not teach this course alone. In fact, I want to dedicate this TED Talk to the course partners. Some of them are here in the room. I call them our course friends. They include the director of an international airport who comes and tells us how every 3 years or so they run simulations and exercises to prepare for an aviation accident. And it's a multi-organizational exercise, and it involves a lot of people. 2 air traffic controllers come and tell us and give us examples of communicating with pilots in trouble, running out of gas, and other situations. The fire chief of training brings his equipment that smells like smoke and shows us the oxygen tank, and we learn that every molecule of oxygen in that oxygen tank is precious when a house is on fire, and time is precious. We have a hospital manager of quality and safety. We actually go to the hospital and tour the JUMP Simulation Center at OSF, and we learn and we are reassured that our concepts and our vocabulary and our theoretical concepts we learn and the mindset of safety matches exactly the tools that they use at the hospital to prevent medical errors. And a clinical education scholar takes us around and shows us how nurses are trained, and we see the equipment that they deal with every day. We also hear from a communications manager of a nuclear plant, because Illinois has 6. And the challenges of working in that environment. And finally, a friend engineer who's also a scuba diver shares the story of a close call of almost drowning while achieving a certification in scuba diving through the lens of high reliability in engineering. These course friends take us into their worlds, into their vocabularies, and their safety mindset becomes contagious for us, for me and my students. They really leave a trace. They take us into their organizational culture, and my course, as I call it, my super course, would not be as successful and impactful without them. We also utilize heavily these databases that also the rest of the world is using. You've heard of many of them. The Federal Aviation Administration, the NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, National Wildfire Coordinating Group, Patient Safety Network, International Atomic Energy Association. These websites are collective accomplishments of expertise. At the click of a button, a novice or an expert can find an accident, an investigation report, and learn from it. They are invaluable. And we should remember that not all countries have them, so they're very precious. These are some pictures from our trips and class visits and experiences that my students benefit from. And again, I couldn't be more grateful for what we learned from our course friends. I would like to close today with a message for the students out there in the audience. There's never been a better time to be in higher education. Universities are full of super courses. To teachers out there, if you're teaching a course that elevates the collective mindfulness of your students going later into the workplace, you're probably teaching a Supercourse. We should all remember the words of H.G. Wells, the writer, the science fiction writer. He said, "History is becoming more and more a race between education and catastrophe." So again, if you're teaching a Supercourse that helps students, humanity, win that race, probably you're teaching a Supercourse. And to the rest of us, all of us, fallible people, imperfect communicators, let's all remember to slow down, to pay attention, and communicate as if someone's life depends on it, because sometimes it really does. Thank you.